Hey guys, Mark Daly with today's devotional. We've been talking about true manhood, and we have considered what the social norm is, what society would maybe consider a man, a man's man. So what does that mean? You have to have great accomplishments behind you. You have to have excelled to the top of the earthly ladder, in maybe fame, maybe wealth. Um, you have achieved something that the world would applaud. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But the truth of the matter is, as we look at Jesus' example, without the right motive, our earthly achievements are worth nothing. Absolutely worth nothing. We saw that Jesus gave us an example as he washed the feet of the disciples. How could he wash the feet of the disciples? He knew who he was, he knew where he came from, and he knew where he was going. Oh my, think about this, fellas. He knew where he came from. He knew where he was going. Where do we fit in there? So we know who we are. We are pretty much nothing without Christ, but in him we are powerful. We know where we came from. We were created in the image of God, and we know, because we've received Christ as Lord, where we're going. It's not question. We don't have to question where we're going. We are going to heaven. In eternity is our home. This life is a pilgrimage, and we are passing through. That's important. When you know that you're passing through, it allows you more freedom and liberty. We're not afraid to die. We've already died. We died with Christ. Our life is hidden in him. Now, our job is to be ambassadors for Christ and be examples to the world of Christ likeness. We do this as we follow his example. We talked about earthly kings being served by others, yet this heavenly king, King of heaven and earth, chose to come to earth and to serve others. And he left us an example, and at the end of that example, we know as we follow him, there is a blessing. Now, if you think about the manhood of Jesus, you recognize that he was more powerful than anyone on earth, yet he chose to serve those who were weaker. He was the wisest man on earth, yet he didn't ridicule or belittle those who were foolish, uneducated, uninformed, without knowledge or spiritual insight. If we were going to follow his example, that means we no longer have to dominate others to prove how manly we are. It means that knowing who we are in Christ, our strength in him, our wisdom in him, our power in him, allows us to let others thrive and shine in our presence, being willing to take a back seat. People that are not as educated as we are or as strong as we are, and yet not to exalt ourselves above them, but to serve them. This is our destiny. This is our calling. 1 Peter 3 gives us a beautiful example in 1 Peter 3, verse 8. Finally, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and humble mind. Do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless, for to this you were called, that you may obtain a blessing. Sowing and reaping again, guys. But on the contrary, bless, for this you were called, that you may obtain a blessing. For what you sow, that will you also reap. For whoever desires to love life and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. So does all of this mean that we should be docile? So we know that we're not called to dominate each other, but to serve each other. So what does this mean? Does this mean that we are not warriors? Well, let me assure you that there is, without question, a battle going on. But this battle is not against flesh and blood. And the way we war is not in the physical realm, but in the spiritual realm. So whereas we're not called to dominate each other, to seek to be served by all of those people that are in our presence, but to serve them. But does that mean that we're supposed to be docile, pushovers, sissies, and to be taken advantage of? Again, let me remind you that there is a battle going on, but the battle is not against flesh and blood, and we are called to war. But this war, again, is not a physical war, but it's a war in the spirit realm. And the spirit realm, what we can't see, is what's controlling the people around us, the governments around us. They're being influenced by the enemy in many cases. So there is a battle, and we as men do have an enemy, but it's not other men. Although our enemy, Satan, does use people who are under his control, our fight really isn't with them, but the spirit that controls them. And we see this in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, where it says, "For though we walk in the flesh, we don't war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God, for pulling strongholds down, casting down arguments in every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ, and being ready to punish all disobedience when your when your obedience is fulfilled." Verse 7, do you look at things according to the outward appearance? Question mark. If anyone is convinced in himself that he is Christ's, let him again consider this in himself, that just as he is Christ, even so we are Christ's. So guys, although we are not called to war each other, we are called to battle. And in order to win this battle, you have to be a man's man. So we'll talk more about this in our next devotional. Love you guys.